You're listening to Speak, Lord. I'm Ryan Rogers. I was reading through the book of Hosea, and one of the lines stopped me, and I just had to give it some serious thought. It was in chapter 9, and it was a judgment against Israel's sin for being unfaithful to God. In the last line of verse 10, I read, "They became detestable like the thing they loved." It matters what we love because we become like the thing we love. So now we're going to back up a ways from this verse and get a quick glimpse at the really bad situation that Israel was in because of their poorly placed affection. Hosea was a prophet writing before the fall of Israel to Assyria. So they were going downhill. Assyria was about to wipe out the northern tribes, and they would be lost to history. The main illustration that God gives through the prophet Hosea is to have him marry an unfaithful wife as an illustration of Israel's unfaithfulness to God. So the whole book of Hosea is a book of broken-hearted love. It is God's love that just keeps coming towards his people, and they keep turning from it and rejecting him. So the line that stopped me was chapter 9, verse 10. But before we get to this point in the book, there's just a whole bunch of descriptions of Israel's unfaithfulness. In the verse right before this, we see a description of how bad their situation was. The text says that they were deeply corrupt, as in the days of Gibeah. This is a reference back to a very dark time for Israel. The last few chapters in the book of Judges are some of the saddest, most degraded descriptions of God's people in all of Scripture. And this reference to Gibeah is a reference to Judges chapter 19 and 20, when this horrific event happened in Gibeah that led to a civil war in Israel. What happened was a concubine was abused all night, and in the morning her master found her dead, and he cut her body and sent it to the tribes of Israel. This is terrible. It's like a hard thing to even say. And then Judges chapter 19 ends by saying that those who see it would say, "No such thing has been done or seen from the day the children of Israel came out of Egypt until now." This reference to Gibeah is a reference to an all-time moral low. When people just look at what has happened and they say, we are in such a terrible place. Here in the book of Hosea, God is saying that his people are at a very low point. And how did they get to this point? They became like the things they loved. They weren't always that way. The beginning of verse 10 says, "Like grapes in the wilderness, I found Israel." That's a good thing. God found Israel in a good state. It continues, "Like the first fruit on the fig tree in its season, I saw your fathers." There was a time when Israel was faithful to God. But right after that, the text says, "But they came to Baal Peor and consecrated themselves to the thing of shame." This is right before the line that says, "and became detestable like the thing they loved." The reference here to Baal Peor gives us another glimpse into their condition. It takes us back to the book of Numbers, chapter 25. I'm going to read the first 3 verses. "While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked herself to Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel." When God says in Hosea that they came to Baal Peor, he's remembering a time when Israel committed adultery with the Moabite women, and they became like the thing they loved. They loved the Moabite women. And then they became like them in worshiping their gods. And that's when the text says, that phrase that stopped me in my reading, "and became detestable like the thing they loved." How did they get so low? They loved the wrong stuff, and the things they loved changed them. As I've reflected on this concept, I've given it the title, Formation by Affection. We are formed by the things that get our affection. There are many other biblical ways of saying this. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. One common phrase is, by beholding, we become changed. We get that from 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, when it talks about beholding the glory of God and being changed into his image. Ellen White uses this phrase a lot. And one time when she was commenting on Psalm 115, verse 8, that says, of idols, those who make them are like them, so is everyone who trusts in them. She said that it is the law of the human mind that by beholding we become changed. It is the law of our mind. It is how we work. The thing we look at, the thing we admire, the thing we love is what we become like. I heard Pastor Craig Groeschel say it this way: your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. So what is your treasure? What are you beholding? What are your strongest thoughts? What do you love? What is captivating your affection? That is what you're becoming. We are being formed by our affections. And here's the thing. If we aren't proud of the things we're giving our affection to and the things we're falling in love with, then we're not going to like the person that we're becoming. We become like the thing we love. And when we realize this, and we realize that our affections are for the wrong things, then we need Jesus to renew a right spirit within us. We need the power of God to change our affections and our appetites, to make the good look really good and the bad look really bad. When Scripture calls us to love the Lord our God with all our heart and soul and mind, it calls us to that because it's appropriate. He's God and we should love him, but also because it's transforming. As we love him and desire him and cherish him and see the things that he is and want those, we are shaped into that character. And this law of the human mind works in shaping us for the bad and in shaping us for the good. What is it that you love? That is what you're becoming like. So make the object of your love the highest thing you can conceive of. Make the perfect character of God the object of your affection and worship and adoration, and we will become like the thing we love. How is God speaking to you? Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. You can find more of Speak, Lord at PastorRyanRogers.com or by searching for Palmer SDA Church wherever you get podcasts.